Hey everyone, it's Joe Waxman, and today I want to talk about Pluto in Scorpio. Somebody asked me to do this one, and well, I probably would have done it anyway because it's it's a it's a generational sign transit that a lot of people have. It's um, millennial transit, and it defines certain age. Um, 19, let me see the exact date. I'm going to share my screen. So we're here. All right. So yeah, November 6th, 1983 is when it started. I'm going to stop share just to talk a little bit first before I talk about the chart, which isn't really as important as the main things. But what is Pluto? So a lot of these are going to double over because Pluto rules Scorpio, obviously. Um, but Pluto is one of the three outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And being one of the outer planets, they take on a more energetic, spiritual quality. These are not personal planets. They're not Pluto, if it's not making like a heavy aspect, any of the outer planets, if they're not making a heavy aspect to a personal point, you're not going to notice them that much. In fact, I mean, Pluto is pretty intense wherever it is, but still, really, if it's not making any heavy aspects to personal planets, you're probably not going to notice it that much. So, like, let's put it in context. Uranus is the first planet outside of Saturn. And that says a lot about Uranus. Uranus is all like, you know, freedom and rebellion and like outside the rule, outside the law, like if we're personifying it a little bit, Uranus would be like, uh, you know, I'm a god because I'm outside the rule of Saturn, right? And that's very important for the Uranian archetype. It's very independent and free and um, outside the law, right? Neptune is sort of like been there, done that. Like we're just floating in space. We're in outer space. We're gonna dream. We're going to expand into nothingness, and we're going to explore spirituality and imagination and creativity and the subconscious realm and sublime truths and illusion and all of it. It's just this big nebulous expansion with Neptune. Pluto is kind of beyond all that. It's sort of like, okay, been there, done that. Now I want to go back into the world with Pluto from way up high and sort of try and see what I can do as this godlike planet. Um, and so Pluto it has this quality of being like a puppet master, if you will, because it wants control and power from this very high up place, right? If we're personifying Pluto, it would be like, okay, I've already expanded way beyond the whole earthly realm. Now I'm coming back and I want to control it all. You know, I want to control all my little minions and make them do my will. Um, so there's this, like I said before in other videos, this kind of like narcissistic psychopathy, if you will, potential in Pluto. Very strong desire to control. Desires in general are very strong with Pluto. Power, control, other people's, money. We often talk about like other people's money, right? But it's not just other people's money, it's other people's power, other people's resources, other people themselves. It's just control and power. And the intellect, such deep intellect. I mean, Pluto is really a master. And I don't think you hear this enough. Pluto is the intellectual master of strategy and psychology. I think the ultimate strategist is Pluto. And I think you see a very strong Pluto playing out in like a lot of like chess masters and you know, military, you know, geniuses and things like that, like politicians, anyone who's like trying to mastermind, you know, the whole situation from up high. Now, obviously, psychologists, and therapists, and things like that. The occult, obviously, astrology. All the other planets have to do with astrology. I mean, the significator of astrology is Uranus, but and with Uranus comes a very high level of intuition, like electric intuition and ideas, flashes of insight. Neptune is very psychic too, in a predictive way. Uh, Pluto also deeply psychic, in a, you know, psychological and manipulative way. Like a hypnotist would have need a strong Pluto. That's the power to control others and to put them to sleep and manipulate them, right? Pluto can be very manipulative of other people because that's the control, the puppet master, right? Klaus Schwab has a lot of like, I don't know his chart, but he's just seems very Plutonian in the way he just wants to control people, right? In a negative way. Obviously, Pluto also has to do with transformation, upward transformation and spiritual growth. No planet or sign has more to do with the evolution growing than Pluto. Right. So Scorpio also has like all these qualities, but then we have to also factor in Mars. So it's a bit more physical than Pluto. So like if I were to distinguish Pluto from Scorpio, obviously one's a planet and one's a sign. So there's that difference. The planet is a physical body. The sign is not a physical body. It's a transitory period in the cycles, you know. We define it by the yearly cycle, the yearly movement of the sun around the earth, or the earth around the sun, technically. The seasons, right? But it's that period of movement that we define as Scorpio. And it has the dual rulership of Pluto and Mars, right? And Mars brings the physicality into it, physical aggression, physical sexuality, you know, more passion, more just hot-bloodedness, you know, the body, you know, and the physical attack to bring it like an Aries kind of vibe as well, because, you know, Mars rules Aries. So, and everything else I said about Pluto applies. So I was kind of redundant to keep repeating the same thing, right? You know, power, control, psychology, narcissism, you know, shared resources, intimacy, also sex, death, birth, right? All the things that we know taxes people consider in Scorpio. Scorpios are very intense, dark, right? They have a dark vibe to them. I mean, I'm Scorpio ascendant, 8th house sun, right? So 8th house sun and Venus, Scorpio North Node. So I get Scorpio. Scorpio is dark and heavy, right? And if we look at like what happened in the 80s, especially after 1983, starting 1983, culturally significant was that heavy metal came on the scene, and heavy metal really took over. Of course, I mean, it depends where you're at. There were other, you know, more poppy, lighter styles of music, but heavy metal became a real thing. It started actually, I guess, with Black Sabbath back in the 60s, back when Neptune was in Scorpio. But there's that Scorpio element, again, even with Neptune in Scorpio. And it continued. and it became very popular once Pluto and Scorpio hit, right? So heavy metal, we could say, is a scorpionic quality. And even more so, I mean, especially with Pluto and Scorpio. It's what, and so like Pluto and Scorpio is very heavy, right? Because the Scorpio, Pluto is in domicile in Scorpio. It like I said before, it lacks dimension. Like, and people like to say, oh, Pluto and Scorpio is so strong and Pluto and Libra is weak, right? I've heard that before. In defense of Pluto and Libra, it's more dynamic, right? It's more nuanced because you're having more than one energy. With Pluto and Scorpio, it's just heavy on heavy, right? And heavy metal is like that. It's just heavy, heavy, you know? And then you get like death metal and thrash metal and all the different metals, very dark metal, pop metal, all the different kind of metal, right? And it was very you know, the whole metal thing is very, very dark, very like Metallica, and Megadeth, and Slayer, and Pantera. They're just like, you know, and it brings up the whole like devil worshiping, like, you know, that's all metal. Mosh pits. I mean, I'm an 80s kid. I'm a 90s kid and an 80s kid. Right? So I know what it was all about. I used to, you know, go to school wearing combat boots and a leather jacket. And I was like metal punk slash punk, just like kind of, you know, 80s, 90s, like with, you know, end of the 80s, early 90s, right? Like when Nirvana hit the scene, I was 15 years old. So I was like right in there, in that cusp. Which is interesting, and might as well, if we're talking about music, might as well talk about Nirvana because well, this is a whole nother video, so I'm gonna save that for another video because that's really interesting, what happened there. But Pluto was still in Scorpio with the whole grunge scene, with the shift from metal to grunge. And you can feel that. You can feel they both have like this heaviness, but grunge was more nuanced. Again, Pluto and Scorpio with a different element than with metal. With metal is just really just Pluto and Scorpio. If you want to know like musically what Pluto and Scorpio represents, it's metal, the whole metal genre, very much so. And so yeah, I mean, it's really hard to like, because Pluto and Scorpio represent the same thing. So what is the Pluto and Scorpio generation? I mean, what are they all about? I mean, one thing that we can say is like they really, really blew up the whole sexual liberation thing. I mean, and the internet, and I mean, just kind of like to the nth degree where, you know, I mean, pornography comes to mind. Not that they invented pornography, it was there before, but they really kind of just liberated it. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because now it seems like, you know, so many young women, especially these days, are, you know, make money in pornography, and it's kind of considered no big deal. It is what it is. I mean, it's a fact. And if you ask me, it's too readily available. But sexuality is definitely a Pluto and Scorpio, both very much. You know, wherever Pluto is, it's going to bring great change and great transformation, right? Pluto is the transformer. It's death and rebirth and evolution. The rebirth is an evolution. It's not just a death and rebirth in a static continuum. It's an evolution. Every time something dies and is reborn, it's reborn new and bigger and more evolved, right? So Pluto kills whatever was before and creates something new that's an evolution, right? And there's often some sort of crisis involved. Pluto brings crisis, pain, crisis, growth, evolution, death, and rebirth. So, yeah, there was a lot of, you know, the sexuality that was liberated through Pluto and Scorpio to whatever end, good and bad, probably both. What else? I think, I'm not sure as far as like psychology goes. Probably the Pluto and Scorpio generation is going to revolutionize the psychology field and psychiatry, and it definitely needs it. I mean, just one of the things that we've heard about recently is how SSRIs don't work. And I knew that before. I knew that because basically it killed my ex-girlfriend. I mean, that's, it's kind of sad. It's very sad, actually, but it destroyed her mind. And I desperately tried to get her off, but she couldn't for many reasons. And I knew another guy who was taking, these dangerous mind destroying meds, and he died too. And the thing is, it's like when you're on them, they slowly make you go downhill, but you can't go off them because then you go really insane. So it's like a dead end. It's as bad as any illicit street drug, heroin or anything like that. It really destroys you. Maybe even worse in many ways. Probably because it's socially not only acceptable, but a lot of times these people are court ordered to take these meds, which is insidious and evil. Evil. Right? It's the death sentence. Right? And so, millennials are still young, but I mean, the Pluto and Scorpio generation should revolutionize the whole psychology, psychiatry field because it needs it. And I hope they do it for the better and bring it back to like something real, because there is real psychology out there, which doesn't involve destroying your mind with these powerful, pharma meds. There's ways to heal. I mean, I know I healed myself from childhood trauma without any drugs. I mean, alcohol, marijuana, but eventually I used to learn to use them therapeutically, which can be done. There's therapeutic ways to use these things, not SSRIs, but so the sexuality, psychology, therapy, anything to do with death, literal death, actual death, the occult and astrology. Some Pluto and Scorpios will make excellent occultists and astrologers. I do not have Pluto and Scorpio, like I said, but I have a Scorpio ascendant, Scorpio North Node, Scorpio Uranus, 8th house Sun and Venus, Pluto trine Sun and Venus. Yeah, a lot of my astrology knowledge comes from that Pluto Scorpio 8th house mix, as well as Uranus and Neptune. What else? Just like Pluto and Scorpio, if it's strongly aspect in your chart, you can expect to have like this very dark scorpionic vibe, right? You see that just like dark, heavy, sexual, intense, fierce, intimidating, powerful. Scorpios, have this very powerful vibration that people either don't like and are scared of, or are obsessed with, obsessed by. And Scorpios naturally have this ability to manipulate others, manipulate people, even without their knowing, even without anyone's knowing, right? Even the Scorpio themselves don't know they're doing it. They can still manipulate other people because of this very forceful, strong energy that is kind of controlling, right? Yeah. So, I mean, that's Pluto and Scorpio, like very strong sexuality, very intense, very powerful. Scorpio, Pluto, anything will definitely have a tendency to rise towards positions of power and control, like CEOs or leaders and that sort of thing. Just because they want it and they're good at it. They're very good at controlling other people, controlling the whole situation. Pluto and Scorpio both want control. I keep repeating myself, but that's one of the main themes about Pluto and Scorpio. Wants control, and therefore in relationships is very jealous because if their partner is doing things with other people, and then it's sort of like they're losing control. And another thing, actually, I forgot to mention, is the issue with trust. Trust is very important to Scorpio, especially to Pluto and Scorpio, especially if it's like strongly aspected in your chart, which I'll get to what that means. But so like if a Pluto and Scorpio person trusts somebody, and then their trust is betrayed, they're lied to or deceived, they will never trust you again. They will cut you out from their life and just forget it. But also because of that, because they do not want to lose trust. They're very good at detecting bullshit, very good at seeing through lies from other people, through lies in society too, and media and the government, and when politicians are lying, the media is lying, and the status quo is lying, when people are lying. Pluto and Scorpio and eighth house, they're all very good at seeing through the bullshit, right? Just seeing through, penetrating the depths. Like if you want an image of what Pluto and Scorpio is like, it's like a taproot going deep, penetrating, right? And there's a very sexual connotation to that, like the scorpion with the tail, penetrating, or the phallus penetrating, taproot penetrating, right? As Aquarius, as opposed to Aquarius and Uranus, which is like explosion and expansion into space, right? Explosion. That's why this kind of a unique combination, Pluto and Uranus, very unique. It's like penetration, deep, and the expansion. But with Pluto and Scorpio, it's just about the deep penetration, going deep, penetrating past the surface, past the bullshit, past the facade, going into the depths. So deep and heavy. It's Pluto and Scorpio. Right. Let me share my screen. All right. So this is the initial entrance, ingress of Pluto into Scorpio. What's interesting is there's already a lot of planets in Scorpio: Saturn, Sun, Mercury, and then in Sagittarius. And just like think about, like, I don't know if you were alive back then, or if you remember back then, or if not, all these planets in Sagittarius. So like Pluto, so Pluto and Scorpio is very deep and heavy, but then Sagittarius is very wild, right? Big and wild and expansive. So it's like a lot of like early 80s, like party time, like just wild and crazy. I mean 70s too, or in a different way, I guess. But a lot of drugs and alcohol. But anyway, so if Pluto is on your ascendant, that's going to be very powerful, especially Pluto and Scorpio. Very intense, very powerful. Obviously Pluto and Scorpio, right? If it's conjunct your sun, again, very intense, very powerful, very deep, perceptive, psychological thinking, mind. It's also going to create a lot of destructive tendencies. Pluto does that, whether it's conjunct your ascendant or your sun. It's going to create a tendency towards drugs and alcohol, sex, all those things. But inherent within Pluto and Scorpio, both Pluto in Scorpio, is kind of like this war, this struggle to overcome those lower desires, right? and transform and become more evolved. So that's something that's inherent. But so it's both these things, like this destructiveness, but also deep penetrating psychological thinking, right? And if it's conjunct the moon, that's probably not so good because moon is debilitated in Scorpio. It's opposite its exaltation in Taurus. It's going to be a very emotionally turbulent moon, very intense, potential for mental illness, but if not, then again, very psychic, deeply intuitive, powerful, psychic minds. Yeah. And so a lot of this is true with, if it's conjuncture, especially like Mercury, Venus, obviously Sun, Moon, Ascendant, Mars. Conjunct Mars, that's very intense and powerful because Mars is a co-ruler of Scorpio. But yeah, those three, those combinations. I mean, less so if it's Jupiter or Saturn. Of course, still that's going to be powerful. Yeah, the more personal the point or planet, the more intense and powerful it is. And also what you want to check is your Mars. Where's your Mars located? If it's sextile by degree, that's good. If it's square, that's intense. If it's opposition, that's also intense. These are hard aspects. If it's in Scorpio, that's super intense and powerful. Probably the easiest will be if it's trine. Probably not in Cancer because that's not good for Mars, but in Pisces, Mars is, I guess, neutral in Pisces. It's not great, but if it's trine by degree, that's quite good. Again, if it's conjunct, that's super powerful but intense. Any of the sextiles, the sextile in Capricorn would be really good, really strong, because Mars is exalted in Capricorn. If it's sextile in Virgo, that's not bad. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. And I just want to say, like, probably the most powerful is conjunct the ascendant. Why? Because the ascendant is the most personal point. The ascendant, it represents the plane of the earth. We live on the earth. We don't live on the sun. And, I'm probably going to, I don't know if I can make it separate. I've been thinking about making another video about sun, moon, and ascendant and the differences. But, people don't understand that the sun sign is not, it is the biggest, it's the star. So it's like the star of the solar system, and all the planets revolve around it, but we don't live on the sun. It's not the most personal planet, not the most personal point. The most personal point in our chart is the ascendant. That's why everything is in relation to the ascendant. That's why the houses are all geared towards the ascendant, right? We look at the sun in relation to the ascendant. We look at the moon in relation to the ascendant. We look at all the planets in relation to the ascendant, because the ascendant is the motion. It's the plane of the earth, if you will. Here's the eastern horizon. Here's the western horizon. Sun rises at the ascendant. All the planets will rise at the ascendant. And because we live on the earth, it's the most personal to us. And therefore, it's also the fastest moving because it moves with the Earth's rotation, the Earth's spinning, right? So it does one revolution per day. The sun does one revolution per year. The moon, 2.5 days. So the moon is actually next most personal compared to the ascendant. First is the ascendant, next is the moon. Third is, well, actually Mercury and Venus are moving faster than the sun. So in a way, Mercury and Venus are more personal than the sun. But the sun's much bigger and brighter. And the sun represents our personality, our ego, but our ego is not that's a very superficial part of our, it's a very big part of our personality. I mean, it is makes up the bulk of our personality, but it's not, doesn't represent the soul. You know, sometimes people say the sun represents the soul. I think there's a bit of confusion, because literally the sun represents our ego, right? And our soul will be much more represented by our ascendant sign. So it's a bit of a tangent, but I just want to say that, like, so, you know, between Pluto and the ascendant, Pluto moon, Pluto sun, Pluto ascendant is the most powerful, right? So if you have a Scorpio ascendant conjunct Pluto, that's more scorpionic, plutonic than, you know, Scorpio sun conjunct Pluto. I mean, it just is, you know, and I've heard. The reason I say this is because, like, again, like, people confuse and think that, you know, that the ascendant is just the mask we wear and that the sun is the most powerful. It's kind of the opposite in reality. The ascendant is far more personal to our true nature, to ourself. So whatever is on your ascendant is really the truest you. Your ascendant is your truest self, and next the moon, right? You know, and then sun, Venus, and Mercury all together, kind of the third layer, and then Mars. For Mars, you know, Mars is a little bit after because it's outside the Earth. Still very personal, but and then Jupiter and Saturn, and then Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. So unless Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, because they're so impersonal, unless they're making a tightly personal aspect, they're not going to have nearly as much to do with you. It was just sitting somewhere like third house, you know, sixth house, you know, eighth, ninth, whatever, 11th. If it's not making any tight personal aspects to your sun, moon, or ascendant, or Venus, or Mercury, or even Mars, then it's not really going to have that much to do with you, not nearly as much, right? And if it's conjunct your ascendant, or at least in your first house, then very much so. Or if it's in your 12th house, if it's in your 12th house but in the same sign, then yeah, still very, very strongly influencing your ascendant. If it's outside your ascendant sign but close, still influencing you but less, right? So by degrees, that's how influential it is. So yeah, I hope you found this interesting, and that's it for Pluto in Scorpio. Super powerful. Just to summarize, super powerful, a little one-dimensional, but the Pluto in Scorpio generation can really create a lot of good change in the fields that it relates to. You know, sex, death, power, control, taxes, psychology, psychiatry, and I think those are the areas that we really, really need it. Yeah, and just, I think in general, the Pluto and Scorpio generation can help evolve society, and help us grow and transform and become more evolved beings in you know, as a society as a whole. So that's my hope for the Pluto and Scorpio generation. Use that super heavy, powerful, forceful, sexual, you know, exotic Pluto and Scorpio for good, and to bring lots of positive change to the world, because we need it. You know, enough with the narcissism, the Klaus Schwabs, psychopaths trying to control everyone for evil. Let's use this power for good, because it is very powerful. Right? Okay. That's it for now. And if you want to book a reading, go to my website, macroastrology.com, or just email me at macrogoldmachine@yahoo.com. And don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and You know the thing. All right, guys. Thanks. Bye.